On today's Hot Sheet, I'm discussing housing inventory, Zillow's predictions for the top housing markets of 2024, and another drop in rent prices. Today is Monday, January 8th, 2024. I am Byron Lazine, and the Hot Sheet starts now. Welcome back to the Hot Sheet. Let me know in the live chat which market you are tuning in live from. And to get the most out of our content at BAM, join the community at BAMX, where you get access to our daily Hot Sheet notes each and every single day. These are today's notes. They're uploaded into BAMX along with our daily downloads, as well as our courses, live streams, and the community. Join BAMX. Use code 2024 to get the lowest price ever, 25% off, or the biggest discount ever that would be into BAMX. Okay, kicking off this week, as we always do on a Monday, we're going to take a look at inventories. What can impact affordability the most? If we can get, well, besides the interest rates, of course, but if we can get inventory up, we could start to see prices potentially stabilize. And that is what we're going to look at here out of the gates. We're going to take a look at the Altos research inventory measures. When they track inventory and active listings, they don't track it like NAR. They track it how you're supposed to. Active listings, meaning what's actively on the market. So this excludes any pending listings. The weekly inventory change here for the past week, inventory did fall. It fell from 513,000 plus to just over 499,000. But it's better than the same week last year. If we look at the same week last year, we fell from 490,000 plus to 471,000 plus. So active listings right now, in comparison to this time last year, we're at a plus about 30,000 active listings. Now, for 330 million people in a country in 50 states, it's not a lot, but it's something. We're potentially showing signs that we're bouncing off of the bottom of our inventory issues and moving up. If we take a look at, I love looking at 2019. I know this number here for 2015 is more jaw-dropping, 959,000 active listings. So basically double where we are right now. But I like looking at 2019. 2019 feels more like a normal market to me than maybe any other year right before 2020. Of course, if we look at the same week in 2019, we had 763,000 plus active listings. So that's comparison to just under 500,000 today, well off of that mark, but again, better than last year. So we could be bouncing off of the bottom. Another thing we're going to be looking at closely here throughout the year is year-over-year price cuts from the same week last year, again, as tracked by Altos research. And this number is coming down from December. So same week, or this week here, this past week, we're at 32.8% on national single-family listings with a price drop. You can see that this has been just coming down since middle of November when we almost hit 40%. Same week last year, we were at 36.5%. In 2022, that number was 22.6%. So we're about 10% higher than 2022. There were many that believed there would be a lot of price reductions coming in end of 2023 and certainly into 2024. And for quite some time now, we've been trending below year-over-year numbers at about this 4% level that you're seeing here on the difference between 2024 when we go year-over-year. It just happened to be 2023 to the end of 2022, a couple months ago. But as we keep looking at these year-over-year numbers, we're sitting a solid 4% below on price cuts than from where we were 1 year ago. So again, showing another sign that there's very much strength on prices. Let's take a look at new listings. This is something that we really need to happen this year in order to recover from the inventory crisis that we're in. We need more new listings. And another good sign that maybe the bottom is behind us. For this week, we had 24,394 new listings. Same week last year, 19,128. So another positive read on new listings above last year. And there we go. I think that's it for inventory, right? If we take a look at new listings just a little bit closer here, we start to get in now into hopefully what we'll see next week is an increase off of this being the bottom for new weeks. Last week of December makes sense. And we should start to see an upward trajectory as we have each of the last 2 years, and as we have also seen historically. Obviously, 2022 was much more robust than 2023. Love to see a 2022 trend on new listings, but we should start next week as we track this data on Monday, start to see an upward trajectory on the new listing data. Zillow's got some markets that they believe will be on an upward trajectory. They've released their top 10 markets for 2024. This is what they believe are going to be the hottest markets of the year. This article can be found on nowbam.com. We link all of our sources inside of BAMX, of course, for our members to make it easy on them, so you can grab it there as well. Here's Zillow's predictions for the hottest markets of 2024. They've got Buffalo, New York. The Bills Mafia was probably celebrating heavy last night, and now they have more to celebrate about, as they are labeled the #1 market for 2024, according to Zillow. Cincinnati, Ohio, and Columbus, Ohio, 2 and 3. Indianapolis coming in at 4. So Buffalo, Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio, and Indianapolis, Indiana. This is an area, this Midwest area, this I don't know why, I don't even think it would be considered Midwest, but this middle of the country area, that region was really extremely hot. If we remember last year, it's the Northeast, and it's this middle northern middle area of the country that has had the hottest markets as of late. And it's really due to the lack of inventory. So Zillow is projecting that trend is going to continue. Let's take a look at the rest of the top 10. They've got Providence in at number 5, Providence, Rhode Island, Atlanta, Georgia, Charlotte, North Carolina. I think Charlotte's going to be on the list for years to come. Cleveland, Ohio, and then Orlando and Tampa, Florida make the list, which is interesting. I'm going to point out why I think that is interesting to me, but really everything is on the eastern part of the country for the hottest housing markets of 2024. You don't see as much dominated in the Northeast as was the case for price increases in the last 6 months, but you do see one in the Northeast, and then that northern middle, what they consider a Midwest region, is really dominant and prevalent there. Why is Tampa and Orlando interesting to me? Tampa is one of those markets that I would anticipate having some type of a pullback. They've got a lot of multifamily inventory coming into Tampa. Okay. Now, Lance Lambert has an interesting take on what multifamily inventory could do to a market, maybe a little bit different than mine as I think about Tampa. You could listen to Knowledge Brokers podcast to check out his thoughts from Friday. Fascinating pod. Also gets into the 10-year, 30-year spread, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. He goes into some deep information about that. But remember the Lance Lambert chart, okay, that he tracks using Freddie Mac House Price Index. He tracks the 384 metro areas. We covered this last week. It was this chart right here. If I type in Tampa, look at what Tampa is doing here since March 2020. This is up well above the national average, 71.5% since March 2020. Since the peak of 2022, up 4.2%. Year over year, Tampa is up 6.9%. So Zillow putting Tampa on this hottest market projection for 2024. They just believe Tampa is going to continue to rip in 24. I mean, we could be, if they go another 6-7% year over year, then we're looking at since March 2020 of near 80%. That's almost double what most of the other areas in the country, other metros in the country have experienced since March of 2020. Eventually, with the amount of building and multifamily coming into Tampa, you would anticipate some flattening or maybe even a slight cool off like we saw happen in Austin. Hasn't happened yet, and Zillow is projecting that it won't happen anytime soon. Let's take a look at Orlando, another one that has just been ripping since March 2020, 57.7% since the peak of 22, 5.1% year over year, up 7.2%. Zillow, again, projecting that one to continue to rip. I'll just pick a couple of these other ones. If I go to Providence, this is above the national average since March 2020, 52.9% since the 22 peak, 8.4%, and year over year, 11.9%. Real lack of inventory in the Providence market. The number one area here, according to Zillow, would be Buffalo. Buffalo is the lowest since the March 2020 peak of the ones that we have just selected at 48.3%. Since the 22 peak, they're up 5.9%. So all of the markets here that Zillow is projecting, I'll go to the Ohio markets here. Cincinnati, 48.1%, 7.4% since 22 peak. Columbus, 45.7, 5.3% since the 22 peak. All these markets that Zillow is projecting to be big winners in 24, their top 10 are all markets that have been doing really well as of late as well. To identify these top 10 markets, Zillow ranked the 50 most populous U.S. metros based on the key following indicators: Zillow's projections for local home value growth, days on market, the speed at which home listings go under contract, job growth per new home permits, and then growth in owner-occupied households. Buffalo rose to the top for job growth, reporting its highest number of new jobs per home permitted, which translates as expected into buyer demand. And so that's why Buffalo is on the top, not because of the Bills Mafia, which took down the Miami Dolphins last night and secured their seat in the to win that division. For any of you, those of you that follow the NFL playoffs. Okay. Now I digress and we move over to what I would consider the best news of the day. That is coming from Redfin News. And that is what they call a reprieve for renters, but what I would call a reprieve for inflation. And hopefully this will reflect in the CPI data, which is going to be out Thursday morning. I will be covering that with you on Thursday morning as we take a look at the most updated CPI read. But it's been really hard to see this data actually impact the CPI, where over 40% of the CPI is made up into shelter. I mean, look at how sticky shelter has been. We've been talking about using real-time data for quite some time, and this number would be a lot lower. Remember, if they took owner's equivalent rent out, this would be below 2% on a year-over-year shelter. We have had a downward trend. We really need this to spike down sooner than later on our fight against inflation if we want the Fed to start cutting those rates. And if they would consider real-time data instead of outdated sources like the owner's equivalent rent survey, which is a make-believe survey collecting feelings from homeowners, essentially, and they use some of this data that Redfin is reporting, would be in a much better spot. Asking rents fall for the third straight month in December, down to 1,964. Year over year change is a negative 0.8%. December rates were a little change from the prior month, negative 0.2%. Rental market has lost steam largely due to a jump in supply. I've been calling this for over a year now, fueled by a building boom in recent years that has left many landlords struggling to fill vacancies, motivating some of them to drop asking rents. Some landlords are also offering one-time concessions. Expect more of that in the first 2 quarters of this year. Free month rent or reduced parking costs to attract renters. This means prices renters are paying in total are likely coming down faster than they appear in the data. That's the big line there. This means that prices renters are paying in total are likely even coming down faster than they appear to be in the data. And apartments.com or Redfin or Zillow, their data is pretty close to real time, and they're saying, hey, it's probably even coming down faster than the data tells us. But the data that's important to the fight against inflation, what the Fed uses, is oftentimes 6 months to 12 months behind. So if they're saying, hey, prices are coming down even faster than the data tells us, and we're 6 or 12 months behind acknowledging this at the Fed, that means they may wait too long to actually cut that interest rate. Remember, they waited too long to start increasing the interest rate. They printed an extra $2 trillion at the end there when inflation had already taken off, and they hadn't acknowledged that inflation had already taken off. It had already taken off. Real people could feel it. They could go to the grocery store and they could feel it, but the Fed didn't acknowledge it. And now is the Fed not acknowledging that inflation has come down significantly because of this shelter data that is lagging significantly? High supply more so than low demand. High supply more so than low demand is driving rent declines. Okay. But if mortgage rates continue to drop at a fast clip in 24, slowing rent demand could become a major driver of rent declines. If we had enough of those potential want to be homeowners get the mortgage rate that they desire, they too could come out of the rental market and kind of exacerbate what we're seeing on the rent declines. Rental vacancy climbs to 6.6% in the third quarter. That's the highest since really 2020 there, when we hit the COVID peak of rental vacancies. And it's been on an upward trajectory really all of the last 12 months. Expect that to continue as this increase in supply continues to hit the markets. Rent rise in the Midwest and the Northeast makes sense. That's where the lowest inventory is for purchase inventory. They fall in the West and in the South, where you have the majority of the inventory. Okay. And there you go on your rental update. That'll hopefully reflect something in the CPI. I mean, we've been waiting and waiting for this lagging data. We've been talking about it since March of last year, where it's like, hey, rent acceleration is coming down. It's dropping. It's been doing that month over month. And every read that we get on the CPI doesn't really reflect it. We've seen a little bit of a decline, but we would like to see a sharper decline, one that would reflect the models that other countries use. Would be my vote, getting rid of owner's equivalent rent. Lance Lambert, when we talked to him on Friday, had an opinion on my rant on owner's equivalent rent in the podcast on Friday. You got to go listen to this pod. I think we'll just link it down below. At Knowledge Brokers is the search on whether you're Apple or YouTube. But Lance Lambert, formerly the real estate editor for Fortune, now has launched Resi Club. We use a lot of his charts and data here on the hot sheet. Spent an hour with us, and he talked about what it would take for the relationship between the 10-year, the spread between the 10-year and the 30-year to start to normalize, which that alone, no matter what happens to the 10-year, if that normalized, we'd be under 6% right now on the 30-year fixed. And with the volatility we've seen in the 10 years to start the year, because the markets have felt uncertain about all the good news that we got at the end of the year, we've actually seen a little bit of movement. We're certainly not at a normal spread, but we've seen a little bit of a movement back towards a normal spread. And that's actually helped keep the 30-year sub 7%, because we've had volatility here on the 10 years. You look at today, we're back up over 4% on the 10-year. We were really basking in the glory at the end of December when we were sitting, well below 4% into the threes for the first time in months. But now we're back up over 4% on the 10-year. But if that spread can continue to slowly normalize, we could continue to see a 30-year fixed that moves down. Of course, we're up from the week prior as we ended last week at 6.75. The week prior to end December, we were in the 6.6s. The Freddie Mac 30-year fixed weekly last week went to 6.62. So about 6 3/4, depending on the person's financing, could be a little less, could be a little more. But that is the Mortgage News Daily update on the 30-year fix. We'll see what kind of a read we get today as that 10-year popped up over 4%. To start this Monday morning, we have the Dow that is down just a little bit, about 0.5%. S&P and NASDAQ are both up a tick, and we'll continue to watch that 10-year, and we'll have some big information. We'll see how the market reacts leading up to Thursday, and we'll have big information on Thursday with the CPI and then Friday with the PPI as we keep our eyes on inflation. Hope everyone has a great start to the week. Again, to get the most out of BAM, make sure you join the community at BAMX. Use code 2024 so you get that 25% discount. And I will see you guys all back here tomorrow on the hot sheet, 9:30 on the East, 6:30 in the West. Until then, toodaloo.